Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Lucore Automotive Services. Today we're filming kind of a weird little episode. This is a combination of an update on our AMC 304 build, as well as comparison to another AMC 304 build. Oddly enough, the timing really worked out that POWERNATION TV literally just put out a video of a build on an AMC 304 for a 1973 AMC Javelin. Their version of the build versus our version of the build is actually going to be pretty neat. And thank you very much for POWERNATION TV for putting that video out and doing a lot of homework for me. Now, please don't take this as the fact that I'm trying to pour anything bad in anybody's Cheerios. But it's going to be interesting to me to be able to see what the way we're building our 304 and the budget and the goals we see out of our 304 versus the 304 that they built and what they achieved with the budget that they spent. And we're actually going to go through the entire process on their video as far as how much they spent, what they bought, all that kind of thing, versus the direction that we're looking like we're going to do, and kind of generally speaking what our budget is. So kind of a two-stage video here. We're going to be doing some comparison stuff and some update on our 304, and then also talking about the video that they shot. So if you guys are interested, some more AMC stuff, here we go. Alright, so let's start with the easy part. The AMC 304 as we have it right now. Previously, in other episodes on our channel, you did see us tear down the AMC 304 donor motor that we were going to put into this car. When we took it apart, it had 30 over pistons. It looked like the heads had been touched. It seemed like it had some good cross-hatching on the cylinder walls. Everything seemed like it was in reasonably good shape, which was all good news. Once we got everything cleaned, we took it up to the machine shop, up to M&M in Delaware, Ohio, and Mike and his crew went through everything and checked to see exactly what it is that we had. Now, unfortunately, we had some bad news at that point in time. We were hoping to reuse the pistons that came in it with those 30 over pistons and just re-ring it. Unfortunately, the walls were pretty severely scored, and we ended up having to punch the block over, so those 30 over pistons are not going to be used. We had to punch them a pretty decent ways. We went from a 30 over to a 60 over, which is not a big deal on the AMC 304s. There's a lot of meat on those cylinder walls, but we did have to go to 60 over, which means we're going to have a little bit more of a complicated situation as far as pistons. Now, for most people, because you wouldn't normally build a 304, you would just put a 360 in it. It's a little tricky to find 60 over pistons, especially right now. There's two major manufacturers that make a cast OEM replacement piston. One is Silverlight and one is Sealed Power. Sealed Power actually doesn't have anything in stock right now in 60 over, and they're not going to have any for 2 to 3 months. I actually talked with them the other day, and we're basically stuck as far as that goes. Silverlight, on the other hand, does have a cast replacement piston for a 60 over 304. It's a normal compression piston, so like 8.5 to 1, 8.4, 8.5 to 1, depending on chamber sizes and that kind of stuff. So not a great opportunity to be able to gain more power off of just the compression side of things. But there are some tricks that we can use to be able to gain a little bit more compression, because we do ideally want to get up into the 9, 9.25 to 1, maybe 9.5 to 1. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going after the Silverlight pistons. Now, interestingly enough, the POWERNATION TV video that they made also took their 304 to 60 over. So I'm not sure if they went a hold and somehow they handled getting a hold of some pistons from Sealed Power maybe before the video was shot or before they went out of stock. But they did happen to find the 1079 NP060 pistons, which is the Sealed Powers that I was originally looking for. So the neat thing is going to be we're going to be comparing essentially exactly the same displacement, 304 their style versus 304 our style, which is cool. Now, in their video, they went to the Edelbrock Performer 401 heads. Those are the aluminum AMC heads designed for the 360, 390, and 401. That's the larger valves, aluminum heads, better flow, better all kinds of things. That's the direction they went. They did clearance their block in order to do that. We're not going to go that route, because these are my 304 heads that came back from the machine shop after they've been checked out. We're actually in pretty good shape. They do have the screw-in rocker studs on these, so that's a good thing. They don't seem like they've really been touched on the inside at all, as far as bowl blending and any of the other fun stuff on the inside. So we are going to cheat a little bit on being able to make these a little bit better head to get some flow through these heads a little bit better. Now, the neat thing is the AMC 304 heads actually breathe pretty dang well for what they are. The dogleg exhaust ports on these are actually pretty efficient as far as moving exhaust gases in and out of this thing. It is going to be a small port head, but I think we can still make some pretty good power numbers without breaking the bank. The nice thing is, with the fact that these are basically still in good condition and they've been cut a little bit, the chambers are going to be a little smaller, which is going to give us a little bit of a bump in compression. Also, we're going to probably shave the deck a little bit, and that's going to give us a little bit smaller compression, or a little bit smaller combustion chamber, which will bump our compression just a little bit further. So there's a couple of things that we're going to be able to do to cheat our way up to a good compression, even with those stock cast pistons. So that's where we are at this point in time. We're going to end up running the Silverlight pistons. We're going to do a little bit of porting and polishing and bowl blending on these 304 heads. Not anything serious, just a little bit of cleaning up, get rid of burring and all that stuff, and cleaning out a couple of things, but nothing real crazy. We're staying with stock valve size. We are probably staying with the stock bridged rocker setup. Haven't really found exactly whether or not we want to do that or not. That's still kind of up in the air at this point in time. There's maybe one or two options that are down the road that we may consider. Another thing that they did on POWERNATION TV is they went roller cam. Roller cam in a 304 is interesting. I don't really ever see anybody that does roller cams in 304s, but they did do a custom roller cam from Comp Cams. We will not be doing that. We are staying old school and going flat tap it. This thing is going to be probably breathing up to 6,000 RPMs, maybe a little bit beyond that, which is generally kind of the end range of what you're going to find out of a flat tap it. But in addition to that, the intake we're running is going to be designed for power in that 2,500 to 5,500 RPM range. So revving it beyond that, the intake isn't going to be efficient anyway. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to go anything totally crazy with the intake that we're planning on running. So that's where we are with the AMC 304 build on our side of things. I will have the block back here possibly tomorrow or the next day. We're going to do some oiling modifications to it to increase the oil flow to different areas of the motor and to restrict oil from other areas. We're going to do quite a bit of other stuff inside the motor to make sure everything is good to go and make sure that our oiling is going to be excellent, because this thing is going to be abused. But those are all tricks that most of you AMC guys have seen. If you're interested in it, it's going to be in a coming up video once we get the block back here, which should be here very shortly. So now, on to the second part of the video. I want to break down what they did on the POWERNATION TV video, what results they got, what they spent, and the parts they went through. So, I'm going to the office, and we'll do that part. All right, so first off, let me preface this one more time with, we are not trying to do anything bad in anybody's Cheerios. Thank you very much to POWERNATION TV for creating the video. If you guys haven't seen it yet, I will link it right now up above me, and you can go watch this video. So essentially, let me give you the breakdown. They bought a 1973 AMC Javelin. It came with a 304 in it. They took said Javelin motor out, cleaned it all up, and decided to rebuild it with a 304 because they wanted to stay with the stock mill. I totally understand. It's kind of like what I'm doing with the 79 AMX, because it doesn't make any sense to put a 304 in and put all the money you're going to put into a 304 unless you really want to stay with that 304 for whatever crazy reasons. So they are on the same page as I am as far as crazy reasons to build a 304. So with that said, let's go through exactly what all they put into this thing and the costs related to this. Now, they ran into kind of similar wear on the pistons. In my case, mine were because it was 20 over, so my pistons actually looked pretty good. The skirts on their pistons actually looked pretty good as well. Clearly, because of the fact they had to take it 60 over, it was a lot worse than it looked. But the oiling system on that car was pretty well shot. The bearings that were in it were pretty well shot, whereas I had all brand new Cleveite bearings in mine. They were still running the original American Motors bearings that were in there. So step one in the video, they reused the factory crankshaft. No big deal. I will be using exactly the same thing. My crankshaft has already been turned 1010, but it is perfectly fine to be polished and back in one piece. So no big deal there. Costs exactly the same. No problems. Next part of the video, they use a Sunnin cylinder hone to be able to take the cylinders over to their final 60 over bore. Exactly the same kind of thing we're going to be doing. So again, same, no big deal. Next part of their video was cam bearing installation. That will be done at M&M Head Service. That is something I would absolutely say have done professionally. Same kind of situation. I don't see what kind of bearings they use, whether they're Cleveite King or whoever they're from. But generally speaking, the bearings are bearings. So we're in the same ball game that they are. Our cost, their cost are going to be exactly the same. They decided to install theirs personally. Whatever, we could do the same thing. But typically speaking, whenever we have a block built or a short block built, that is done by our machinist, and then we just take care of the rest of it once we get it back here. So again, cam bearings, we're still same. So far so good. Same goes with the main bearings. They're going to do main bearings. We're going to do main bearings. If you're going to be rebuilding a motor, no kidding, you're going to do bearings. So again, it's more bearings. We're still same. Now after this is when things start getting a little bit different between what they're going to do and what we're going to do. Main cap bolts are reusable for the most part. And I will recognize that they are probably sponsored by ARP in this, because all of the hardware that they list and they show on this is all ARP stuff. They use ARP rod bolts, ARP main, ARP intake bolts. They use ARP oil pan bolts, ARP everything. That's where you really start to add some costs to their side of things. Now that may be something that makes sense. You know, if you're going to be spinning those rods up higher, upgrading to some ARPs does make sense. In a previous video, I did talk about keeping track of all your hardware, because the just go buy new fasteners and hardware thing can really sneak up on you as far as costs go. You can end up with some really significant costs. In this case, a couple of $100 worth of bolts and such to be able to get this thing reassembled. Some of that you can reuse factory stuff. Some of it you want to use ARP, but we're going to try to reuse our factory stuff with the possible exception of going to ARP rod bolts, just because we do plan on getting a bit more RPM out of this thing, and it's a good idea to have really good quality rod bolts. So the ARP mains, ARP intake, and ARP oil pan bolts, probably not necessary. Again, it's a place we're going to save a couple of $100. So the next part they discuss on their build is the camshaft. They went with a custom ground cam from Comp Cams. It is a roller camshaft. I couldn't find anything for this on Summit's website, so I'm sure it's something custom ground for this, but literally nowhere could I find anything that talked about using a hydraulic roller cam on a 304. In my experience, typically speaking, people that run roller cams are usually going for a higher RPM range, which, you know, would be in the 5,000 to 7,000 RPM range, or they're going for more of a power build. It's not necessary to run a hydraulic roller cam, but it's interesting, and it does tend to free up power pretty much across the entire rev range with having the more efficient setup of a roller cam setup. So they went Comp Cam roller cam. We will be going flat tappet on our side of things. Again, this is kind of you're going to get eaten by the dollars kind of thing. Not a huge difference in cost. We're going to estimate somewhere we're going to save $150 to $200 on the camshaft versus going the roller cam setup, because you're going to have to go with roller lifters, the camshaft itself, all that stuff. So again, we're starting to see that differentiation as far as costs go. Next up is the double roller timing chain from Comp Cams. Again, as we said, there's a lot of things that you're just going to be replacing. In this case, same thing with us. We're going to be putting a brand new timing set on this thing as well. So same. Whether or not we go with Comp or somebody else, they're all basically the same idea, same cost. No big deal, no differentiation there. Total seal piston rings are on the next piece of this. Their decision to go total seal versus using something that was just provided some other place, there may be a little bit of difference there as far as piston ring cost goes. There's maybe a little bit more on the more expensive because they went with a higher grade piston ring that one we're going to get with our solo light setup. We'll call that one even. All right, so now, as I was saying in the beginning of the video, we get into the pistons. We were looking at originally doing a set of sealed power pistons. We've run sealed power pistons in a lot of vehicles before. Pretty good quality piston for a cast piston. And even with the additional running, possibly running boost on it with a little bit of boost, they're a much better piston than came from the factory. And that was initially where we were wanting to go. Those sealed power pistons are not able to be ordered right now. I spoke with Sealed Power specifically, and they're not available. So they got their hands on a set of them. They're 60 over pistons. They're 1079 NP060s. That's originally what we were planning on running. We can't get Sealed Power pistons. We're going to be running Silverlight pistons. Absolutely identical type piston, just different manufacturer. So the nice thing here is we're really going to be able to get an apples to apples comparison here. Cost wise, very, very similar. We're within a couple of $10 here. So no real difference as far as the pistons go. Same displacement, same dish, same valve relief, same compression. So should be able to give us a really, really serious apples to apples comparison as far as pistons go. And again, nominal difference as far as costs. Now this part's a little bit interesting. This is where we discuss the in the hole portion of this. It seems as though they did not deck this block at all. Now whether or not that's because they didn't have the ability to deck that block or what the situation is, but that piston being, as they call it, 37 thousandths in the hole, is interesting. In our world, we're going to cheat this system a little bit and we're going to deck that block and remove some of that in the wholeness for that piston to be able to bump up our compression a little bit. It does actually cost us a little bit more for our block machining because of the fact that we're going to be cutting that deck surface a bit. But that's going to raise that piston up in the hole, which will decrease our combustion chamber, which will increase our compression. So the other thing with compression is the fact that we're going to free up more power, and it gives us a little bit more abilities to make a little bit rowdier cam choice with a little bit higher compression ratio as far as static compression goes. So this is where things get a little bit different between what they decided to do and what we decided to do. After that, we get to the oil pump situation. Now, with AMCs, if you're an AMC person, you already know this, but if you're not an AMC person, the oil pump is built into the timing cover. In our case, our timing cover is actually in pretty good shape, so we can reuse our timing cover. They're going to be using the same thing. They're reusing their timing cover, so we're good to go. Now, there are ones that are in the aftermarket that are for sale. If you want to buy one, they're a couple $100. They're available through Voltaire. There's a couple of other places that do manufacture timing covers, but they decided to do a oil pump rebuild kit. We will be doing exactly the same kit from Melling, replacing all of the stuff for the oil pump, because what we really don't want to worry about is oil pressure and being able to make sure all of that is in good shape, because you starve your engine of oil, it's over with. So same, exactly the same costs, nothing different there. Oil pickup, it's one of those things you just throw it away and get a new one, to be honest with you. Our 304 one is not in terrible shape. The one that came out of the 360 was completely disgusting because it had eaten bearing material, but again, it's one of those things, just replace it, get it done, no big deal. It's a couple of dollars, but it's nothing real expensive, and for peace of mind, again, with your oiling system, don't cheap out, don't chance it, get it done, get a new one. So same, we're gonna put a brand new oil pickup in ours. We're still there. Now things start getting a little different between what they did and what we did, or what we're doing. The next up that they deal with is the oil pan. They decided to go with a stock replacement Milodon, beautiful bronze kind of thing, and fastened it with ARP fasteners. Again, don't really need ARPs. They're pretty, but whatever. It's $20 that we don't really need to spend. But the oil pan, we have a good oil pan. I'm not real worried about it. There's no holes in it. It's in good shape. I'm not entirely sure what their purpose of doing this was, other than just hanging all brand new parts onto this thing. But that's like a $300 some odd oil pan, and it's $300 some odd that we don't need to spend. So we're trying to do ours kind of as a budget build for the general, what everybody would normally do kind of thing. And this is where I think you see a little bit of a differentiation between what we're doing and what they did. Theirs is more of a budget is not really that big of a deal kind of build, whereas ours is budget is very much a big deal kind of build. So I think ours is interestingly more normal to what you guys would do at home. But I could be crazy, and I've done things where budget was completely out the window myself. So this is where things, again, start to kind of differentiate between their costs and our costs. But let's get... Now, this is not actually a part where they discuss any extra costs in this video. If you look at the picture, you can see that they do have ARP fasteners on all the front cover, which is not surprising. You know, you've got another $50-$60 in ARP fasteners there. But what you don't see or you talked about is also the dampener that's on there. They did not reuse the factory dampener, and that dampener is a Professional Products dampener. We can tell by the stamp that's on the side of the dampener. Now, their dampener is $165 from Summit. We're not entirely sure whether or not we're going to be reusing our factory one or we're going to be using an aftermarket one, because there does seem to be a little bit of a separation between the inner ring of the harmonic balancer and the outer ring of the harmonic balancer, and I don't really want to risk a factory component from 19 whatever falling apart. It's just not worth it for $100 or $150, $160. It's not worth risking it. You can get a factory replacement Dorman unit. They're like $100. Or you can get a good one for $150, $160. We have used a lot of PRW products in the past, and there's a very good chance that we end up going with a PRW balancer from this. They are adjustable balancers, so depending on how we decide to balance this rotating assembly, it allows us a couple of different options. And then it allows them to run on a 304, a 360, all kinds of different things. So that's probably the direction we're going. Their balancer is $165. The one we're probably going to do is $150. $15 isn't going to make or break us. We're in the same ball game still, but this is where those little hidden costs come in, where you don't really see that until you spend more money on it. And it's not spoken about in their build list. We can just catch it from what we see in the photo that's an aftermarket harmonic balancer. It's another $160 something. Okay, now we get to start talking about some stuff that gets expensive. Their next step is going to the Edelbrock Performer 401 heads. These are designed for the large valve AMC motors. So basically every other V8 other than the 304. 360, 390, 401, all bolt right on and ready to rock and roll. These heads are about $2,200 from Edelbrock. They are a much better head than a set of cast iron heads. But because they are not designed to run with an AMC 304, there is some machine work that you're going to have to do to be able to clearance them and to make them really give you much of any benefit whatsoever. Now, because of the fact that they're aluminum, they can also run a higher compression ratio, and they're more efficient at getting rid of heat. They're also lighter. So there's a lot of benefits to running aluminum heads, but not necessarily exactly what we're thinking. In our world, we're not going to be using these aluminum heads that they used. As I said earlier, we're going to be reusing our factory 304 small valve heads. We're going to clean them up a bit. We're going to do some porting and polishing on them, but nothing serious. Still leaving them exactly how you folks at home would do it. But we would have, maybe $1,000 in rebuilding a set of heads, maybe $1,200 in rebuilding a set of heads if we're really getting crazy on these things, versus $2,200. So now, there's $1,000 imbalance between what they did and what we did. Now, in their world, yeah, that may make sense. In my world, because I want to keep this very budget friendly, it's not in the cards. So we're not going to be doing the Edelbrock heads. So things start getting a little bit different here. The next piece of this, as you can see in this, they actually have the machining that's been done on the top of the cylinder to be able to allow that larger valve to clear it. This is something you can either do at home with your own tools, or you could send to a machine shop to do. We're going to guess in this case, because they have their own essentially machine shop there, they did this themselves. If you were to send this off to your machine shop, not real expensive, and they would probably do this around the same time that they're doing the honing situation. We don't have to do this step because we're not going to be using the large valve heads, but we are going to have the additional expenses on the machining side of things of cutting the block down. So dollars to dollars, probably pretty similar costs from our machinists. They spent that money on not decking the block and putting the larger valves in it, or putting a larger valve head in it. We're going the other direction and decking the block to bump compression up using the smaller valve heads. So should be interesting to see how that works out, but cost-wise, yeah, we're probably the same as far as machining goes. No big deal there. Next up was the Felpro head gaskets. Yeah, we're basically going to be using the same thing. Now, Felpro makes a lot of different types of gaskets. There's a lot of different types of gaskets, as well as different thicknesses of gaskets. So in our world, we probably will not be using exactly the same gasket that they're using. They don't say what thickness of gasket that they went with, but ours is going to be chosen based on where we're trying to get our compression and where our chambers end up being. Cost-wise though, basically exactly the same thing. It's just a matter of ours will be slightly different, most likely, than what they use, but same cost-wise. As we said earlier, these guys use a lot of ARP stuff, so this is the portion where they are torquing their ARP head studs down, or head bolts in this case. We are going to be reusing our factory head bolts. It's a couple of $100. Again, as I talk about before, those little expenses as far as fasteners go can really add up. You got several $100s here in fasteners that we are not necessarily going to need to spend, and we don't necessarily need. Now, is our ARP great? Yeah, we use ARP in lots of stuff. I've got ARPs all over the place in my Pontiac, in the Mopar, in all kinds of stuff that we build. Yes. Are they budget friendly? No, not really. In situations where you've got to get a lot more performance out of them, is it a good idea to buy the extra insurance? Yeah. In this case, I don't think it's something we really need to worry about, but something we're seeing a little bit more of the differentiation with. They're going with the more expensive ARP head bolts versus we're going to be reusing factory head bolts. Topping off their valve train, on top of a set of brand new push rods, which we're going to be doing brand new push rods also, so no big deal. They went with a set of Harlan Sharp roller rockers. Those are expensive. As I said, we are planning on reusing our factory bridge rocker setup on ours. So not a lot of money. We're just talking, you know, a couple of $100 here and a couple of $100 there, but a couple of $100, a couple of $100, a couple of $100, it does, you know, tend to add up. Okay. The next thing they put on this thing, which is the last major component, is an Edelbrock ProFlow 4 intake manifold. Fuel injection system. I'm not 100% sure I understand exactly why they did this. It does add drivability and tunability to it. I will give them that. It's nice when you get in a car and it has fuel injection. It's been converted from carbureted to fuel injected. You just turn the key and it fires up. The ability to control ignition timing and fuel and all that fun stuff versus turning wrenches and screws. It's pretty handy. But it's expensive. This is a $1,900 item for the intake setup and the ignition system, or at least the distributor. Does not include the coil. It does not include the fuel pump setup that you're going to need to put in this as well. So you have $1,900 in the intake setup and the fuel injection assembly in the front of the motor. Now you also do need to add a coil on it, which we do here in just a second. You also need to add a $500-ish fuel system to be able to get that fuel to the front. You can do that cheaper, but the one that Edelbrock themselves says is a good one to run is going to be in the $500 range. So our idea as far as running a intake system is going to be, we're going to run the 304 with our 4-barrel Edelbrock Performer intake AMC that we got on our 360 purchase, and we're going to top it with either an Edelbrock or a Holley carburetor. We haven't 100% figured that out yet. We have an Edelbrock carburetor that 360 came with that we could reuse, or we could put a Holley on it. It doesn't need to be anything crazy. You're going to have a couple of $100. Let's call it $500 in a fueling system. Our intake manifold was, if we bought it brand new, would be $300. We got it on our 360, so we didn't pay $300 for it. So let's say we had $800 in our carb and intake versus they've got $2,400 between a fuel pump setup and a fuel ignition system or fueling system. So you've really got some distance that's starting between where their build is less budget friendly and more fun and cool versus ours is more budget friendly and more old school. Not saying their way is wrong. Please take me honestly here. The fuel injection setup is cool. It's just expensive. The next little piece you see in their video is going to be, as I said just a moment ago, the MSD stuff. So they have an MSD blaster to coil. They run MSD wires. neither are going to be super expensive. You're going to have $55 in an MSD coil. You're going to have $115 in a set of MSD wires for it. You know, 170 bucks, not a real big deal. We went with a Jegs brand coil and some Jegs wires that are a little less than half that price. So we saved, you know, 50, 75 bucks, somewhere in that range. You know, not a huge deal, but every little bit helps. Now, I have no idea what they did as far as spark plugs, but nominal cost difference as far as spark goes. You know, maybe they spent $3 a plug and we did $2 a plug, so not a big deal. After that, they get this thing on the dyno cart and on their Superflow dyno. The last thing we see as far as any pieces and parts go on this are the fact that it's not running a mechanical fuel pump, which is not a real big deal because it's running fuel injection, no big deal. But what you do see is the fact that it's running a set of shorty headers, not the original log style manifolds. Now, finding a set of headers for this car may be interesting. I haven't really gone down this path myself because I haven't gotten there just yet. But doing some homework on Summit's website themselves, looking this car up as a 1973 AMC Javelin with a 304 in it, I wasn't really able to find much, but I did find a set of Patriot headers that look very similar to that. And I can't tell exactly what that tag says. That might be Hedman, that might, I don't know. You guys tell me in the comments whose headers these are. But generally speaking, those headers are about $350. Now, this is up in the air on my build. I don't know whether or not I'm going to be running a set of shorty headers, if I'm going to be running the original manifolds. It's going to depend on when we get it in the car, how much room we have and what's available, what's out there, what fits, because there's not really anything that fits for a 1979 AMX. Probably like a set of block hugger headers maybe. I don't know. We haven't really figured that out yet, but that's another $350 on this build that just kind of slides in there that you don't really know just happened. Is that considered part of the engine build? I think it is, because you can't really run it without them. And it's another, you know, kind of hidden cost, and that's the whole idea of this whole process. So after that, now that it's all done, everything's ready to rock and roll. They let this thing loose on the dyno, and here we go. You end up with a 60 over AMC 304, about 8.3, 8.4 to 1 compression, Edelbrock Performer RPM cylinder heads on it, Edelbrock fuel injection system, comp cams, roller cam, a lot of bells and whistles thrown at this thing. It does RPM much better than those cars originally did in the past. They made RPMs way back, or they made power way down in the rev range when they were originally new, because it was smog era kind of stuff. Nothing revved out to 5,000 RPMs or higher. You know, they would make peak power before 4,000 RPMs and then fall off. So this thing does make a lot more power than it did from the factory, and it makes it a lot later. So it's going to be a lot more fun vehicle to drive. It's going to have a lot more pep to it. Their final numbers, 334 horse, 331 foot-pounds of torque. Their peak power is at like 5,500 RPMs. Peak torque was around 4,800 RPMs. Pretty respectable numbers. I'm actually pretty impressed with what this thing did, especially given the fact that it was an 8.4 to 1 compression ratio. There is definitely some power that could have been found by going up a half a point on compression. Is it a ton of power? No, probably not. Would it have allowed a little bit more of a rowdy camshaft option? Possibly. The nice thing with the way that they built their motor is it's running on very low compression to the point where you could run literally any fuel you want to out of the pump. You know, 87 octane, this thing would run exactly how it did on the dyno. I don't know. That's where a lot of people have been messaging us about this build, saying, well, what about this? Comparing what we're looking to do and what they're looking to do. And again, I've said this before, please do remember, POWERNATION TV, I appreciate you guys making this video because it's showing me a lot of data that I would not have been able to find otherwise, because nobody's really building these things. But I really do kind of question as far as why you wouldn't have gone for maybe at least another half a point of compression, or maybe a full point, or even more than a full point, especially since it's running on aluminum heads. You could easily be running this car on 9.5 to 1, even 10 to 1 compression on normal pump gas, especially with a set of aluminum cylinder heads. Our goal on cast iron heads is going to be 9.5 to 1. They could have easily gotten to 9.5 to 1 on aluminum heads. Now, some people have brought up in the comment section as I'm commenting on their video, you know, well, maybe they're building it for boost. Well, some of that does actually make sense. If they're talking about the fact that they're going to build this for boost, though they never mention that, if they are going to build this for boost, it would make sense to build a lower compression motor. But it wouldn't be quite that low. And they would have used different pistons. So you have the really good cylinder heads, and you have the really good fuel injection system, which allows you tons of control and a lot of tunability. But those sealed powered pistons are still a cast piston. They're not a forged piston. So they can handle a little bit of boost, like, you know, 8-10 pounds of boost. After that, you really start getting into some sketchiness. If they were planning on building it for boost, I would have thought they would have gone to a forged piston. And in the forged piston world, you can get a set of cast iron or a set of custom made pistons for you for like $400 more than they spent for those cast pistons. And they're going to take a lot more boost, and you can get a custom made compression. So if you wanted to run 9 to 1 or 9.5 to 1 and still run boost, you could run 14 pounds of boost on 9 to 5 to 1 and still be okay. I'm just a little confused as far as why they did the way that they did it. Not saying that their way is wrong versus my way is right. I'm just kind of curious as far as why they built this the way they built this. Now, I don't know if they'll ever see this video or if anybody there actually ever pays attention to what I'm saying here, but I'm just curious as far as why they decided to go the way they went. Now, I want to break down all the costs here real quick for you so you guys can see exactly what we're talking about as far as their build. And then once we get mine done, I'm not going to disclose exactly where my money is going to be right now, but I'm keeping track of all my bills, and we'll be able to have a conversation very honestly about what their build cost, what my build costs, what our difference is as far as the dyno experience goes, and compare and contrast the two. Obviously, I can't do that right now because mine's not done yet. It's still being machined. But I want to go over their build real quick just as far as costs go. So we've got your Comp Cams hydraulic roller cam set, $215.99 from Summit Racing. You've got their Comp Cams double magnum timing chain, $44.99. You've got the Harlan Sharp AMC rocker setup, $333.99. Melling oil rebuild kit, $24.32. Meladon replacement oil pan, $328.95. Total Seal classic piston ring package, $115.77. ARP connecting rods, there's a bunch of different options. ARP main bolts and ARP connecting rods, we're going to guess $60 for the main, $70 for the rod bolts, somewhere in that range. The next thing we run into is the Comp Cams camshaft. We don't have any way of being able to figure that out. It's not listed on Comp's website or Summit's website, so we're going to guess somewhere in the $250 to $350 range. We'll call it $250 just to be nice. Next part up is the Seal Power 1079 NP60 pistons, $311.99. The Professional Products Harmonic dampener, $164.99. The Edelbrock Performer RPM cylinder heads, $1,099.50. That's for one. So two of those. That gets you to $2,100.99. Felpro gasket, $30, or head gasket set, $30.99. The Comp Cams high energy push rods. These are going to be dependent on what exactly what you need as far as length goes. $32 essentially, $31.99. Again, we're going to have to do push rods anyway as well, so not a big difference there. The Edelbrock ProFlow 4 EFI system, as I said originally, was $1,895.95. And then you also do need to have the fuel system to be able to push that high volume of fuel to the front. Because it's EFI, it runs on high pressure fuel versus extremely low pressure fuel for a carbureted system. So you have to put this system to be able to push it up to the front. This is the kit that Edelbrock recommends. You can do whatever you want, but $491.95. ARP oil pan bolts, $44.99. MSD blaster 2 ignition coil, $55.88. MSD ignition wires, $114.95. And then their Patriot headers, or whatever headers that they ran, whatever those were, $352.99. For a grand total of $7,371 in parts cost. Whew. That's a lot of money. You guys, I'm not going to sell to your wallet. You can determine whether or not that's a lot of money to you or not. To me, that's a lot of money. Just in parts costs. Now we got to have machining costs that are in there as far as cleaning and machining. I don't know what their costs are, to be quite honest with you. It's going to be a decent chunk of change. You got to figure they've got their own equipment. It's going to cost me at least $1,000 in machining. There's also things that we don't have built into this cost, as far as lubes and gasket materials, gasket kits, bearings, all that stuff. That's not built into this. So there's at least another $200 or $300 worth of costs in parts that are on this build. So it's about a $7,500 cost as far as pieces and parts go. So factor maybe $1,000 in cleaning and machining and all that fun stuff, and you've got about an $8,500 build, which is expensive, but not out of the ordinary. Anybody who's ever built a motor knows that they get expensive in this. As I've been saying throughout this video, the little things that keep adding up, a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, it really does start to get up there. So hopefully ours comes in less than $8,500. My goal is going to be honestly about half of that, to see what I get as far as what I can get for what I can get. Now I have the ability to be able to get a little bit more on the used stuff, and maybe that's a little bit different than what they want to do, but pretty cool video, to be honest with you. I'm really, really excited that somebody made this video. Thank you again to Power Nation for making this video. There's really not anybody else out there that's done any kind of 304 real comprehensive builds like this, and it's really interesting to me to be able to see what you guys did as kind of a all the bells and whistles kind of thing versus what we will do as far as a more budget-friendly build goes. And then when I toss mine on a dyno, we'll be able to compare apples to apples and see how it all works out. Will I make as much power as them? Probably not. Maybe. We'll see. Will it be less expensive than them? I can promise you that. But it'll be neat to see. Now, the caveat obviously is also that the dyno to dyno doesn't match up. They're running it on a dyno and it's very cold there, and who knows. We're running it on a dyno and it may not be the same kind of dyno. It may be different temperatures. Who knows? So dyno numbers to dyno numbers are not always equal. But it will be interesting to see our graphs and our numbers and our data that we get out of this build compared to theirs, because I haven't ever seen anybody do this, so I'm glad somebody else foot this bill and I didn't have to do it to be able to find out this information. So if you guys haven't watched the video yet, I highly recommend you go back and watch it. It's a pretty good video. It's about 20 minutes long, but it's really, really good. There's a lot of interesting data, and give them some feedback on it that you saw on our video that we were talking about it. Thank them for making it, because AMC folks know that you don't get a lot of loving in the industry. There's not a lot of people who show off AMC stuff, so thank you very much to those guys for building it. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed our breakdown of their video and kind of comparison and update on our 304 build process. And if you are interested, please do stick around. Please do click on that subscribe button, because we're going to be building this 304. We're also building a 360 at exactly the same time for exactly the same car, because I'm not going to give up on this. Even though it's completely stupid, but that's what we're going to be doing. So please do stay tuned with that. As I said, please do click on the subscribe button so you can keep updated on that AMC build. Drop us a comment in the comment section below. What do you think? Do you like this kind of video as far as us breaking down other people's builds and talking about the costs in relation to building versus rebuilding versus all that kind of stuff? Is it interesting to you? Does it seem like I'm peeing in somebody's Cheerios at this point in time? Let me know what you think. Let us know what you think. This is the first time we've ever done a video like this. Please do click on that like button. Lets YouTube know that you actually paid attention, that you made it this far, and that you like what we do. Yeah, time to get back to work, get my hands greasy. Got to wrap this Pontiac 455 project up and hopefully get it fired up end of this week. And you'll have another video coming to that thing here very shortly. We've got a whole bunch of other cool stuff coming on in the next couple of days. So thanks for watching. We appreciate you being here. We'll see you next time. Take care.